Hi everybody, it's Jackie from Myra Stitch and Post, and I'm back once again to show you about how to achieve a scant 1/4 inch on your sewing machine for piecing. First off, I'd like to show you a couple of little 1/4 inch piecing feet that we carry in the store, and you'll see we sell both Husqvarna and Pfaff as well as Singer sewing machines, and these are their 1/4 inch piecing feet for the respective machines. And you'll notice that on my Husqvarna foot, you see a bunch of little red marks. You'll also see, if I turn this over, it'll show a little bit better, a little guide. And that guide is 1/4 inch from the center needle position. Now you'll notice this is a new foot. It has a slightly oval shape to the foot. Our old feet used to have a round circle. And we quilters have asked for an oval shape so that we can nudge our needle back and forth. And our Pfaff has the same setup. Now, the little red lines, what do they mean? Well, those are measurement lines. And on the Husqvarna, you'll see that we have a center line. And then in front, we have a red line that's 1/8 inch. We also have 1/8 inch line on the back. And then the next red line is another 1/8 inch. So if you total those two, that's 1/4 inch. And it's important to know what those lines mean because those are your pivot points. So if you have to turn circles or turn corners, you'll be able to do that. The Pfaff 1/4 inch foot doesn't have as many lines, but it still has your center needle line and it still has your 1/4 inch front and back. Now, what I'd like to do is take you over to my sewing machine and show you how to set up your sewing machine for your scant 1/4 inch. Come on over to my sewing room. Hi everybody, I'm back here now over at my sewing machine, and you might notice I'm sitting in front of the beautiful Pfaff Performance icon, and I'd like to show you how you should set up your sewing machine for a scant 1/4 inch. Now the first thing that you have to remember is this is not always a perfect science, but the first thing I want to do is show you that I recommend that everybody shorten your stitch length to a 2.0 from your default of 2.5. The next thing we want to do is we want to move our needle over to about 1.5. Some of you, depending on your fabric, may need to go to a 0.8. Now you will notice that up on the top here, I have a neutral thread, light gray, or a fill 50 weight, which is what we recommend. Now, in my previous video, you saw me cutting 2.5 inch strips, which I now have sandwiched together, and I'm going to simply sew these together with my new seam allowance. So I'm going to take my strips, and no peekers, I've got them lined up perfectly, don't have pins, and I'm going to drop my foot, and I'm going to make sure that the guide on my 1/4 inch piecing foot is along the edge of my fabric, and I'm going to simply sew all the way. Now let me explain the reason the neutral thread, because we want to save all of our money and buy lots of decorative threads for quilting. So for piecing, you need a neutral color thread. That shortened stitch length will ensure two things. One, your stitching doesn't show, and two, your seams won't unravel. It's just a little trick. Once I get to the end, I'm going to use my built-in thread snips, cut my fabric, and I now have my scant 1/4 inch. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go and press this seam, and then we're going to take it to the table and we're going to measure it. And my strip set, my 2.5 inch strips, when sewn together, should measure 4.5 inches. So let's go to the ironing station and do a quick little press, and then we'll be back to measure and see exactly how well we did. Hi everyone, we're back here at the ironing station now, and I just wanted to show you that I have this nice green fabric that we stitched together for our test strip, and I used the light gray thread. And it's very, very difficult to see. And part of the reason for that is because it is a 50 weight and it's a shortened stitch length. If it were longer, you'd be able to see that. So now what I want to do is show you the correct pressing technique. And we are pressing, we're not ironing. Ironing is what Grandma used to do with the old dry iron. I love to use steam, and I know there are people out there who don't like it, but I'm just touching the fabric with my iron. And what that does is these fibers, the thread fibers, get embedded into my fabric fibers. And now if I run my finger over there, I can't feel anything. Prior to me pressing that seam, I had a little ridge. And now it's nice and flat, and it's sort of seating itself into the fibers of the fabric. Now, the biggest mistake I see people doing is they press incorrectly. So we set our seam like I just showed you, and then I'm going to take my fabric and my iron, and I'm going to just sweep my iron over the top, over the top, over the top, just like that. And by doing that, you eliminate pressing pleats into your seams, which I see all the time. All right, so now the moment of truth comes. We're going to take this back out to the cutting station, and we're going to get our ruler. And if I've done everything correctly, so what I mean by that, I've cut a correct, accurate 2.5-inch seam allowance. I used the proper setting for my scant 1/4 inch on my sewing machine, and I pressed correctly. If I've done all of those things correct, this little strip set that I have here should measure 4.5 inches. So let's go and test it out. Well, we're back at the cutting table, and I now have my pieced 2.5-inch strip set sewn together, pressed with my seams set. I'll just show you the underside. And really, I pressed it towards the green fabric. It doesn't really matter whether it's towards the green or the dark. Most patterns will give you an indication of which way to press, so you would follow the instructions on the pattern. Now, the true test is whether or not this now measures 4.5 inches. So I have my ruler, and I'm going to put the ruler on the strip set. And lo and behold, look at that. It's a perfect 4.5 inches. Now I want to explain to you something. What you've just learnt with the moving of the needle is not going to be the same on every set of strips that you sew. And that is because fabric comes in different thicknesses. And I will give you a little tip that dark colored fabrics tend to be thicker than lighter colored fabrics. Consequently, if you have two very dark colored fabrics that you're sewing together in a strip set, you may not need to move your needle as far, or you may need to move it over a little bit further. It's a test. And my suggestion is when you start piecing a quilt together that you do a little test sample like we've done here, cut some 2.5-inch strips, move the needle to where you think your 1/4 inch setting should be, your scant 1/4 inch setting, and test it. Press it and measure it. And if it works out to 4.5 inches, then you know that's the setting. All right? I'm Jackie from Myers Stitch and Post, and I'd like to invite you to come back and visit, and I'm going to show you how to turn this small little strip set into a perfect 4-patch. Thanks.